Hey, Lance, great to have you on the show. I'm really excited about our conversation. Before we dive in, why don't you let the audience know something about your background and what you're doing today, because this is going to be fun.
Well, thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm originally from New York. I live in Las Vegas now. And, take the story way back because I think people find it interesting. I was working on Wall Street for my dad's company, got my economics degree, and decided pretty quickly that I don't want to sit in an office my entire life. And went for greener pastures with another relative, actually, in Scottsdale, Arizona, Phoenix area. And I was part of an enormous startup franchise. It was a TGI Fridays franchise that in 5 years, we took it from nothing. We bought 4 stores and other acquisitions. And before you knew it, 5 years later, $225 million later in sales, we had something good on our hands. And that's when Fridays was great. But I got bitten by the bug of franchising in those days. Started really understanding what systems were and kind of that business in a box. Somebody else created the system. You just follow their system and pay a little royalty, and they're on the hook for doing R&D and making sure things are fresh. And well, it didn't work out for Fridays as well as it should have when leadership changed. But for many, many years, Fridays had an incredible run. And but I ended up in Vegas. I've been a franchisee of multiple brands like Wingstop and Krispy Kreme donuts. And I became a pretty big donut expert, which we can talk about if we have time. And, here I am today. I had an opportunity to help a lot of emerging brands through restaurant consulting. And a lot of them had challenges in whether it be lead generation or basically finding franchisees. So about 15 years ago, I dabbled in that. And all these years later, I've been full-time for several years. And I now represent more brands than anybody in the US. It's almost 600 brands. So about 175 restaurants. And the rest of the brands in every category imaginable, from home health care to painting to, you name it. I have a crime scene cleanup franchise that is amazing and now owned by a private equity group because it's such a high performing brand. But I have a blast. I can tell you that for sure.
Well, that's crazy. So what is this donut expertise? I mean, come on, aren't the donuts, I'm in California. We refer to the donuts of death, but everybody goes for them anyway. So what's the story there?
Well, it all started, besides my experience with Krispy Kreme as a great franchisee for Krispy Kreme. We did very, very well. Did about 25 million at our franchise, little franchise, and nicely profitable. And we were the second franchisee for TGI for Krispy Kreme. But many years later, I got a call from a gentleman that I knew. Hey, can you set up a gourmet donut shop? We seem to be missing that in Las Vegas. And a brand called Pinkbox Doughnuts was born. I created that essentially from scratch, pun intended. And it was a very successful brand. And, and recently I came across a Food Network star. He came across me. I have a friend that's on the board of a prominent restaurant chain that knew this Food Network star, and he was starting up this donut shop and needed some advice. And who better to call than apparently the donut expert, I guess? That's what I am now. And I fell into it. I fell into that hole, pun intended. So, that's it. So I know everything about donuts. Didn't expect to know everything about donuts, but it's a fun thing. I love the restaurant business, love the space.
Yeah. And so if I understand your business, part of it is you have this plethora of franchise options. If somebody says, hey, I'm pretty good, but I'm not smart enough to really pull this whole thing off myself. And then you've also got this other side where you help entrepreneurs who have the systems in place and then want to start a franchise. Can we dive into the first part initially absolutely. Here and talk about that? What type of people come to you? And then, how do you sort out which franchises may be best for them?
Great question. And one of the most important questions for what I do. Number one, I do have a free assessment on my website, which we could talk about later, but that free assessment is quite scientific. It takes people about 15 minutes and it analyzes everything based on the way they answer the questions. Things like risk tolerance, what's their comfort zone really look like? What are their skills? What are they looking for in a business? And then by the time I look at the results of that, I ask a whole host of other questions. What is your investment level? David, are you going to be the owner operator, or are you looking to do something where you're the, semi-absentee owner, where you're going to hire a manager and let them run it, and you won't participate as much? So depending on all of those factors, industry isn't even important. There are people that come to me that say, Lance, I absolutely don't want a restaurant, or I absolutely do want a restaurant, or you know what, I'm really open, show me. Tell you a story. Recently, a gentleman called me through a referral. He said, look, I had a 28-year career with one company straight out of college. It was an amazing, one of the top companies in the US that everybody knows. And 28 years helping to build that company. So he's a very bright guy. And he said, look, I got a bunch of cash, but I don't want to spend it all. So what do you recommend? And I said, well, let's dig in a little bit. What do you ideally want to invest in yourself in a business? And his answer was, probably not more than 200,000. Would you like an SBA loan? You might not even qualify because you have too much cash on hand, which is another story. In his case, he was one of the rare occasions that had too much cash. Who has too much cash these days, David? Not that many people. So I said, what else are you looking? Are you looking for something brick and mortar? Do you want to do retail? And he said, no brick and mortar. If I can help it, no brick and mortar. So I found him a brand. It's a B2B concept. It's a newer brand, which again, his risk tolerance was bigger than most people. He said, I'm fine with the newer brand if I could see the profit path. And that's what I like to call it. I could really, and the beauty, David, of franchising is the validation process. There's a lot of steps before you make your final decision. But let's assume, like dating, you like the brand, they like you after call number one. And then there's call number two. And then there's typically what's called a discovery day. And a discovery day, all franchise brands have some sort of discovery day. And typically that involves getting on a plane, getting in a car, going to visit a corporate office, meeting the executives of the company. There are some companies, that do it virtually these days, but that is a part of the process. Assuming everything goes fantastic, it's a large percentage of deals end up happening once people are done with discovery day, because people don't invest their time and money to go somewhere and not do a deal. So in our case, let's say discovery day is successful. There's a validation stage that is one of my favorite, because if you are looking at a prospective franchise, you then get handed a list of franchisees to call. Hey, David, call 5 people at random and ask them about their experience. And you get to sort of validate that, number one, they do this deal again and they're happy and they're profitable, they're getting the appropriate amount of support, et cetera. So in the franchise process, I don't care whether you're a super successful entrepreneur that already has businesses. I have people that are super successful that own their own businesses and know that, for example, Fast Signs is a great franchise. It's a gold star, I call it, franchise. And they just think that rounds out or diversifies their portfolio. They want a successful franchise like Fast Signs. I have other people that have never owned anything, and they've been saving their entire life, almost like when they bought their first house, if they even have a house, and they want their own business. They're tired of working for somebody else. And then the third group tends to be the sort of corporate refugees that, like I described earlier, a gentleman that retired all on his own terms, or other people, men and women, that don't know that they're going to have a future. I have a gentleman last year who was amazing. He worked for a company for about 23 years. And he calls me and says, I'm going to be downsized. I'm going to be without a job within 5 years. I said, how do you know that? And he goes, I just know the way this particular industry is going. Can you find me a franchise? And I did. Matter of fact, I spoke to him recently and he's happy as can be and never been happier. Sets his own schedule, the whole 9 yards. So that covers the franchising side. As far as the why do people get into franchises, there's so many reasons. It's a proven system. You don't have to worry about anything. You're just literally the local person on the scene that is representing the brand. It's still your own organization. It's your own entity. But you're just licensing the name.
Let me ask you a question. But are there franchises that are less organized than
Absolutely.
others? I mean, there have to be, right?
Absolutely. There are brands that are, a little more loosey-goosey than some other brands. And that might fit the prospective franchisee's personality, because flexibility, a little flexibility, although there's not typically a lot of flexibility. Let me give you an example, David. McDonald's. If you become a McDonald's franchisee, if you don't like the uniform, it's too bad. It's the McDonald's uniform. Nobody's letting you change that. Nobody's letting you change the fancy little fry box that's typically red with the golden arches on it, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have any flexibility when it comes to changing much within the franchise system. But there are certain things, if you get with an emerging brand that, let's say, has less than 30 locations or 20 locations, there might be some flexibility. I was an earlier Wingstop franchisee, and I became president of the Franchise Advisory Council. The purpose of any franchise advisory council is to guide the company. So do we need to add new products? Are we not happy with this box that the wings go in? For example, when I was there in my era, we ended up putting the vent holes, asking the manufacturer to put the vent holes in the top of the wing box, so burning hot wings in a styrofoam box didn't just steam and get soft and mushy. The steam came out and the wings stayed relatively crispy no matter how long you waited. So these are innovations that typically franchisees could develop. At McDonald's, hey, the filet of fish and the let's see, the Big Mac were invented by franchisees. So
Yeah.
there is always a little bit of flexibility. And look, the collaboration between franchisees and franchisors is extraordinary. That's what makes brands successful. Everybody has a vested interest. Makes sense?
And again, some do that better than others, right?
That's absolutely true. The validation stage, if you're going through the entire process as I was describing, you'll know you need to really like the leadership of this brand that you're looking to invest with and believe in their brand. You complete discovery day, you complete the validation process. It's hard to make a wrong decision. And here's the other problem or issue, I should say. It's not really a problem, or it's just an opportunity, is some of the people, it's like the interview process. How many times do you interview somebody and think they're amazing, and then they start working for you and they're not?
Yeah. You're like, who's this person that showed up? They weren't in the interview.
There's also an old saying in interviewing that the best you're going to see most people is at the interview. And it's the same thing with franchisees. Some people can talk a good game, but then all of a sudden they're not there working. They're not really, look, there's a bottom 20% of all franchise organizations, including McDonald's. And there's a top 20%. The top 20% are making a lot of money. The bottom 20% are not. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. I'm curious about the validation process. Do you ever have someone go on site and work a day at one of these people they call? They say, hey, can I come in and just work? Put me doing anything. I want to hear what the vibe's like. I want to see how things go.
There are certain brands. There absolutely are certain brands that let's say take a little more skill or either dexterity or whatever it might be, depending on who's going to do it. So yeah, I mean, brands might allow that. Some brands might allow that. Not all brands do, due to either liability or proprietary secrets. People don't want to show them their line set up in a certain restaurant. If there's a closed kitchen, that is. Obviously, if it's an open kitchen, you can pretty much see everything. But that is possible. Part of the discovery day process is to give people a feel of exactly what it is like being a franchisee. Because the last thing anybody wants is somebody to become a franchisee and say things like, 2 months later, David, this isn't what I thought it was. That's the whole idea of the discovery day process.
Now, with the situation we have, the racial problems we've got in the country right now, is there any additional effort that's being put forth by some franchisors to engage with people of color or people that maybe need a hand up, or, where they can go through a process and kind of prove, hey, I can make this work. I've got the aptitude. I don't have all the skills. I don't have all the knowledge, but if you give me a hand up, I'll make it. I don't want to hand out. Is there any special effort by any companies in that area?
Well, I don't necessarily know. I mean, look, there's a lot of franchise brands that are very, as far as veterans, as an example, this isn't the question you asked, but just I'll answer it a little differently. Veterans, there's all kinds of programs. There's a whole Vet Fran program where veterans get discounts. Spoke to a veteran the other day that's going through the process. He found out what his discount is. He couldn't believe it. Could be special loan programs depending on the time of the year. And at the end of the day, 14% of franchise owners today happen to be veterans.
Yeah.
Something that's certainly tracked. As far as minorities and all that, there are absolutely certain brands that are very focused on diversity. Absolutely very focused on diversity. Some brands not as much. I mean, some of them kind of let it fall in place. I'll tell you the truth. When I owned franchises, depending on, I always said to myself, because I was taught by an African-American friend of mine who was much older than me, he said, look, your employees, especially in a forward-facing retail or restaurant establishment, should reflect what your community looks like. So if half of your community you're in is African-American, that's what your staff should look like as well, right? Makes sense?
Oh, yeah.
And I could tell you that there are some brands that make a concerted effort to diversify. Maybe if they haven't had certain franchisees of certain ethnic groups join them in quite a period of time, they might look at themselves and say, we need to diversify a little bit. We need to make a better concerted effort. But there's all kinds of programs out there to, let's just say, accelerate that process.
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be a lot of programs outside of the franchisor themselves. So it seems like a great opportunity for someone who wants to advance themselves, whatever their racial background is, anything.
Yeah, there's a
It
lot
also,
of, I was going to say the E2 visa program with a lot of immigrants. I mean, that's a big program in franchising, and that's a complicated program. We work with quite a few immigration attorneys. I'm working with an amazing guy from Pakistan, and he was here on a work visa. He has a master's. He's been educated in the United States, but he only has about a year left on it, and he wants to now get an E2 visa where he has to spend at least $100,000 and buy a franchise. That's the easiest thing. And submit that through his attorney, who's very familiar with immigration and franchising, and get that accepted, and he can stay because he's bringing business and employing people and doing all the right things that anybody in America would be proud of, right?
yeah. And if I heard you correctly, it also sounds like franchising is a great opportunity if you want to have a positive impact on your community by developing the people who come to work for you, because they provide you core systems for the business. And so few businesses actually really develop their people, whatever business they're in, franchise or not. And if you want to
100%.
focus on that, you can have a major, major impact.
Exactly. And let me give you another example, another story. When I was with Krispy Kreme, a friend of mine that was on one of the workforce investment boards for the state of Nevada, where I was operating Krispy Kreme. We had Nevada and Utah for Krispy Kreme, two whole states, and we were the second franchisee. I got an award from the governor at the time for hiring the most what they call disadvantaged employees, people on welfare, people that were currently unemployed, people that had. I hired an autistic gentleman that nobody would employ, that I found through an agency, who was a nice, clean-cut gentleman, very much autistic, on the spectrum, but they paid for a trainer to teach him his job tasks, so I didn't have to pay for that. And then I just paid him, put him on payroll, and he was phenomenal, because he was taught a task, and boy, this guy did that task better than anybody. And so, it's a feel-good sort of thing. That wasn't pushed by Krispy Kreme. And there's certain federal programs, but there's also some state incentives. And I love to do that because it feels good. And look, as a business, you're getting tax write-offs. There's a lot of advantages to helping people that benefit the business as well.
Well, and what strikes me is just, running a business, as you said, is so systematic. And it was actually the epiphany I had back in 2003 that I had leadership attributes, but no skills. I had I had some aptitude. So really what I found was my biggest gap was systems. And so I developed a leadership system that now has been narrowed down to 3 steps. The first step is systematic power. I call it 3 strands leadership. First strand, systematic power. And that's the core, that's the foundation. And the franchise provides that for you. And often not just in the operation. And by the way, I've never owned a franchise. I'm not pitching franchises, but for the person that wants that structure or needs that structure, my impression is most of the franchises provide it not only on the business process side, but also they give you some processes with marketing and, you know, how to engage with the community and those type of things, don't they?
All of it, absolutely, and you're 100% right. So they're putting you in this system, so to speak, and showing you every aspect. You're going to get a detailed operations manual. You're going to get instruction on all of it, and then you're going to have, you know, you're going to have mentors within the group besides trainers that are going to help you with all of it. So there isn't going to be, oh, how do I clean this? How do I do this? How do I get leads? It's all done for you. I have some very good brands. And many low-cost brands that, especially due to technology today, that could generate 80% of their business through the technology that the brand brings them. Whether it's lead generation or local SEO, search engine optimization that the brand's doing, so your customers are coming to you because of technology, which is incredible. So
yeah, years ago, back in, let's see, it was probably 2003. I met a guy. I was working for a company that was owned by a large legal publisher in Chicago. And I went to a franchise event actually to try to sell our software that was for employee performance management, doing reviews and setting goals and stuff. This guy came through and he goes, "Oh yeah, I work for the top, you know, your parent company." And I said, "So what are you doing here?" He goes, "Well, actually my wife and we own 9 Taco Bell franchises." And he went in to talk about not only he loved it and it worked really well for him. He was doing it on the side with his wife really kind of driving it, but it was also a real estate play that, you know, with 15-year real estate loans, at the end of 15 years, he not only had 9 stores, but he also had some real estate assets that if he wanted to sell and retire, he'd be basically set as long as he stayed focused on the business.
Yep. That's exactly how McDonald's, everybody knows the McDonald's story, most people do. And that's Ray Kroc's play in the beginning. It was all about the real estate.
Yeah.
You know? So let's talk about your other part of the question. So I set quite a few people up to franchise their own business. And I have a group I work very closely with, guys that I've associated with for almost 10 years now. And they set up quite a few franchises, and I'm part of that process. So because I've been a franchisee of multiple brands, and I, you know, understand marketing and I understand everything about the franchise world, we have a complete system. And let me give you a recent story. I set up a restaurant franchise in Atlanta. Incredible young restaurant brand that is doing amazing things as a young brand. So I get a call one day from a young lady, and it has a salon suites business. No surprise, in Atlanta, because she was referred to me by those same guys. Hey, she asked, who set up your franchise system? I want a franchise. I want to do what you guys are doing. She has 2 salon suites brands. And you mentioned earlier, you know, you have to have your system set up. Well, it's very helpful. Like her, she was incredibly organized and had her systems already set up. Some people, look, I want to make sure that the brand is established to some degree. I want to make sure that there's a trademark in place, because there's some states you can't even franchise in without a trademark. I want to make sure that they're a profitable brand, because if you're going to charge somebody a royalty of 4%, 5%, 10%, whatever it's going to be, they have to be profitable after all that. And some brands are certainly more profitable than others. They have to have either systems in place currently or have the ability. They have to make me believe that they're the right person to be able to put these systems in place, or be willing to hire somebody that will do that for them. And then, you know, are they properly capitalized? Because if the parent company goes out of business and can't support anybody, that's bad. And is their brand unique enough? What is their secret sauce? And I'm not always talking about restaurants here, because sure, McDonald's has a secret sauce, but what is her secret sauce? And in her salon suites concept, when I asked that question, I got a great answer. And the answer was, well, I've looked at all the other salon suites brands, and she named several. And guess what, David? They're in my portfolio. And I looked them up really quickly as I was talking to her. And I told her, I said, I'm looking them up right now. I want to understand what their franchise fees are. I want to know what their costs are. And when you put together a franchise disclosure documents like our attorney partners do, it's not, there are pro formas that can be used in young brands and sort of certified. However, in most cases, you're using actual numbers in a franchise disclosure document that it actually costs either franchisees or the corporation to open previous stores, previous locations of whatever this is you're doing, whether it's home-based or a restaurant. So in her case, she's like, yeah, I can get these things open for $100,000. I'm like, whoa, that is your secret sauce, because all these other brands are quite a bit more. And then she had some other cultural things that she does within, the way she rents the suites and blah, blah, blah. So the point is this. The point is she was ready to go. In fact, she's about 30 days away. Typically, we can set people up for franchising. Georgia, where she's based, is an easy state to set up. There are certain states that are called registration states, like California and New York. More cumbersome. You can't just start franchising right away. You have to wait for acceptance and approval. Georgia, not so much. So she'll be ready pretty quickly in about 30 days to start selling franchises. So hopefully that helped.
Wow, that's awesome. So what about services business, looking at franchising versus looking at just doing some type of partnership reseller type of deal?
Yeah, a lot of that is like personal preference. It's like what I call, you and I go out to dinner, David, and, I might have the steak, you might have the lobster. It's just personal preference. I can tell you that I had a phone call recently with a very good friend of mine. I've consulted for his restaurant group many times. They have very successful restaurants. They have 4 of them in the Southeast. And he's got a partner. They're 50-50, and they've been together for years. And they had a call with me, and they said, we really want to understand, Lance, should we franchise? Should we not? Should we invest our own money to grow this brand? And I gave them all the pros and cons. And it's not a question of right or wrong. It's different. Starbucks, as an example, as you probably know, and many people know, is not a franchise. They chose not to be a franchise. Why? If you hear Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, talk, it's about their culture and it's control. He wants to absolutely control everything. If he wants a new blender in the stores, he's buying a new blender and sending it to all the stores within the time frame that he wants. He doesn't have to tell any franchisees anything.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to get them to buy anything new and have them him and haw saying, well, I just bought a blender last year. You just changed the logo again. I don't want to change the logo. And, so there are ways to work around that, where corporations or franchisors will pay franchisees a little bit of an allowance to change certain things at an expedited pace. Nobody wants to be the last, Taco Bell in the country with the old logo, right, David? If there's a new logo, everybody wants to, and it's proven, by the way, when you put a brand new, fresh sign out, your sales could go up in restaurants as much as 10%, because people want to see what's going on. There's a new logo. Something new is going on. So, so the bottom line is it's personal preference. And my guys, I just gave you the example of in the Southeast, they're going to probably put a fund together, raise some money, because they're already very successful. And they're going to build basically corporate stores with investor money, their money. And once they get to 50 or 100 stores, they'll just sell.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I had a thought earlier when you were talking about the vetting process for coming to you and looking at doing a franchise. How often do you have husband-wife teams come in, and what do you watch for there to see whether that's going to be a good working relationship or not?
Working together as franchisees together?
Yeah, both of them in the business.
Well, so here's the thing on that. I'll give you a perfect example. Recently, I had a wonderful lady that came to me, Beverly, and she comes to me and she says, I want a franchise. I don't know what I want. You tell me what I should do. And she told me how much money, blah, blah, blah. Her husband and her have a small business together that they've had for like 15 years, but she's tired of the business, loves her husband. They're getting along well, no problems there. But she says, I want a business that I could run. And I said, do we need him involved in any of these phone calls? She said, absolutely not. It's all me. Perfect. And that is how it worked out. It's not how it is all the time. I ask the right questions in the first call most of the time. And sometimes I find out later that it's not the case. The husband's all of a sudden on the phone on the next call, or vice versa. I start with the husband and the wife jumps on the call. And you're right, there are fireworks. They're arguing on the phone. And look, it's easy for me. It's a difficult process that way, but it's easy for me to mediate because I could give them all sides of it. And look, I have to have big ears and listen because, typically what ends up happening is it's all about comfort zone. Some people don't have that risk tolerance. Like maybe the husband is willing to risk a lot more than his wife. So that in and of itself is challenging. So it can be. So David, one other point I didn't bring up, one of the major advantages of owning a franchise brand as a franchisor, setting up your own independent business to franchise, is the exit strategy. Because private equity groups, especially in the last several years, are paying consistently 10 times cash flow for franchise brands. So especially the smaller brands that they know they can buy and scale across the entire country.
That's it. I remember looking at Chipotle when it was like 230 or 300 restaurants. McDonald's owned a big chunk. And I had my mom buy the stock because I said to her, they only got 300 outlets. They're going to have 3,000 before you know it, or whatever number. So I would think as a private equity fund, they're looking for ways to spend their money. And if you have a proven franchise, whether they have 30 or 300, they probably look at it. They can grow it 10 times, 100 times beyond that.
A lot of times the private equity groups are looking for, 5 million in cash flow, but they can do less than that. And that's someone attractive and proven enough for them to take over and then make the leap. And then the rest is just all about the numbers. So as a young owner, and I'm not talking age, but in a shorter period of time, you can make, it could be a substantial exit for you and then do whatever you want after that as well. So
now what is the cost to set up, your own franchise? I would think, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, that's a lot of detail going in there.
It can be, but look, the group that I work hand in hand with, we do special deals because for us, it's not about the setup. We have a lot of great franchise attorneys. For us, we want to be involved with them to represent their brand and sell their franchise. And so for that, you can get into it as little as $25,000. And we'll do payment plans and we'll set up your franchise disclosure documents, your franchise agreement, and your operations manual. Those are the three pieces that are required to start franchising.
Awesome. Well, that sounds really interesting. Anything else we missed that you want to cover today?
One other thing is, look, the best way that I get wonderful people to speak to is through nice, warm referrals. Friends and family, folks that are listening to a podcast. If anybody listening knows anyone interested in a franchise, if it's not you, please refer them to me. Go to ionfranchising.com. There is a form there. Contact me. Give me their name and phone number at least, or email address. And I've been known to pay let's call it a sizable amount of money. Recently, one of my referral sources, she expected to get about $2,000 on a deal average. And she got quite a bit more than that because I do it based on a percentage of what the deal is that closes. So it's what I call my success fee. I don't get paid anything. Remember, my services are free to everybody out there searching. I get paid by my brand. So happy to give you a piece for referring me somebody that buys a franchise.
Yeah, Lance, I think in addition to the fact that you listen really well and try to find a match rather than push something, this concept, and you were talking about off air, where, she was expecting to get about 6,000, you paid her 8,100.
I did.
The fact that she trusted you and then you showed the integrity to come through and pay her more, I think really speaks volumes about why you're seeing success, because you're really sowing the seeds where, when people trust you, they come back again and again. And so I do encourage our listeners to get a hold of you, which brings up, how do they get a hold of you, Lance?
ionfranchising.com, ionfranchising.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well as Ion Franchising, and would love to speak to anybody. Again, I'm free, so love to have a call.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for being with us. This has been fabulous.
Thank you, David, very much for having me.